So, hi, I'm here with Betsy Ladyzhets and Miles Griffis, and they've just started a new publication called The Sick Times, which is an online publication covering long COVID and ME/CFS and I guess related um, post-acute infectious syndromes and so on. But I'm going to actually let each of them introduce themselves as well, and then we're going to talk about their new publication. Okay, Miles, you want to go?
Yeah, my name is Miles Griffis. I've been living with long COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. I started reporting on it in 2020, writing from both personal perspectives and doing original reporting on long COVID. And yeah, we just launched our website this last week, our newsletter. We'll basically be having a newsletter until for a few more months, and then we'll have sort of an official like full site launch sometime in early 2024.
Betsy?
Yeah, so I'm Betsy, freelance science and health journalist. I've been covering the COVID pandemic pretty closely, both as a freelancer for national publications and through my previous newsletter, which was called the COVID Data Dispatch and focused on data and surveillance issues. And so I completed that project recently and now working with Miles on the sick time. So we're really excited to be, I think, kind of doubling down on the reporting that a lot of that we have both been doing as freelancers, but to kind of have a bit more editorial agency and really being able to pursue stories just on a very regular basis.
So what made you feel that it was sort of necessary for this kind of to have this kind of publication, or was it sort of more that it was sort of convenient for both of you to have kind of a venue for your work, kind of as part of it, or was it really also that you saw a gap in what was kind of out there, or both?
Yeah, I think the main thing that we had sort of hit this year, Betsy and I had been in touch um, for almost a year and a half or so now, and we've sort of shared notes on pitching and stories we were working on.
I mean,
And I think this,
pitching to magazines or pitching to news
yeah,
organizations, right?
yeah, just like independent, clients we worked with, different magazines, websites, publications. Um, and I think this year we both had grown pretty frustrated with sort of the return rate we would get from editors when we would pitch them stories about long COVID. I had so many that went unread, didn't get any response. Or we would get a response that would say, oh, we're interested in a long COVID story, but like this one's a little too it's not really like hopeful enough. Can you do something more positive?
Hmm.
When we're just trying to cover like the reality of living with long COVID.
Hmm.
um, so I think we decided sort of this summer, Betsy reached out to me with this idea to start a publication. um, and I was all for it because it would finally sort of give us the time and space to write the stories that haven't been that haven't been covered because of whether there's some bias in other publications or editors or whatever. We could finally sort of start reporting on the stories that we found were really important and kind of been ignored throughout the long COVID crisis over the past 4 years.
So, Betsy, what are some of the kinds of stories that Miles is talking about that have been frustrating not to get out, or that have been ignored, or that you guys want to focus on?
Yeah, so definitely, like Miles is saying, it's sort of a combination of personal frustration with not being able to do the stories we want to do, and also just seeing that long COVID is not really covered in the way that it should be by the mainstream media. Like, there's a lot of dismissive articles that come out by journalists who are maybe not very familiar with the topic or aren't really familiar with the history of past post-viral diseases, as you mentioned. And so some of the pitches that I've had have been like discussing that history or figuring out how to learn from it. Um, I have done some reporting on the NIH's Recover program, as you and I have talked about, and that's something I'm really going to be doubling down on at the Sick Times. And other government accountability stories as well. To me, that feels really important to say not just like what is the science and the research that's happening, but also where are there government institutions or other kinds of major institutions that could be doing more to address this crisis? And
Hmm.
like, why aren't they? What are the barriers there? Are there kind of bad actors that we can look at from an investigative lens? in terms of the institutions that maybe funnel money or funnel like PR into dismissing COVID and dismissing long COVID. Also looking more at some of the healthcare issues, looking at like long COVID clinics, which Miles and I have both written about a little bit, but would love to sort of cover in more depth, like what are the kinds of care that people are getting, what are the gaps there. And also something we're really interested in and excited about doing is potentially partnering with other journalism outlets, both like national outlets that might have different focuses than we do, and also local outlets, because there's not a ton of like local journalism on long COVID, even though we know that it's a huge community and there are, of course, people living with it in all the major cities that have newspapers, you know. And like I've done a few stories in New York City for Gothamist and WNYC, which is the local NPR affiliate here. And I really enjoy doing those because it feels very meaningful to be doing these pieces that are very specific and actionable for the people with long COVID who are living in that area. So I think if we can help other local journalists do those kinds of stories, that also would be really, really, really valuable.
So that all sounds great. And sort of from a practical matter, it's the two of you. And what, so what else is what's your structural support, or how are you planning to kind of be doing this?
Yes, something we're actively working on figuring out. I would say we're aiming for kind of a combination of reader donations and then grants and like more in the future also sponsorships. So that would be things like running an advertisement in the newsletter or having an organization sponsor like an online event, something along those lines. We definitely don't want to have a paywall, like for many reasons. Like I don't have to go into that, but no paywall. So contributions from readers would be more like the donation kind of thing rather than a subscription. But yeah, and as we start to raise that money, hopefully we'll be able to have a freelance budget for writers and other kinds of contributors, and then also bring on people as like part-time staff, either people who are like regular contributors, or we're hoping to have like a podcast and other audio stories. So having folks to help with that. We already have people who either we've reached out to or who have reached out to us who are sort of on deck to start contributing once we are able to pay them. So,
okay. And I guess in order for that to happen, you actually had to have a structure, which is sort of what you have now, and sort of a platform and a site.
yeah, yes, we have a website, we have a donation platform,
and
grant applications are pending.
I'll post all that with the link and everything like that. And so what you sort of mentioned in a few months you'll sort of open the full site, really, like now you've started the weekly newsletter, which is great because basically it's something that I've sort of had thought about on and off, like it's such a helpful thing to just have a one place, but it's just too much. It takes a lot of time. It's not really that easy to do. It looks like it should be easy, so it's actually a very useful thing for anybody who's interested in the issue to sort of have as something going forward. So it's great that you have that, and I've subscribed to it already, and I hope that goes well. And anything else that you want to add? Oh yes, you were saying, what is it that you hope to have up, say, in a few months? Is that you think you'll have already some stories in the works, or some stories that you've done that you'll hold for that kind of opening, or how do you see that happening?
Yeah, we hope to have, we'll be planning to have, I guess, like bigger features that we'll be working on over the next couple months, some investigations, maybe more like we've also have a lot of grants out for different resource and like more service journalism oriented things. So we'd like to have, like a really solid document that patients can bring to their providers or physicians, with some of the top research and some of the leading possible treatments that they could trial. We've heard so much from other people with long COVID that they show up sometimes at a long COVID clinic, sometimes at their physician, and there's basically nothing for them. So having these document that could point to, maybe they could trial some safe drug that is available that helps with, some symptom. So we would love to have those types of, just resources for people with long COVID and other associated conditions.
Oh,
Um,
that's so sort of like pragmatic or helpful things that people can use as resources. I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you how to come up with the title. What other titles did you consider? And what made
yeah.
you settle on the Sick Times?
Betsy, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, so we definitely went through quite a few ideas. I think we settled on the sick times for a few reasons. One was we kind of decided to not have a title that was just long COVID something, because we wanted it to include the kind of broader spectrum of infection-associated chronic diseases. And also we wanted to be prepared to cover like other issues like other issues that might relate to long COVID, sort of the public health preparedness aspect of this, continuing to cover the like acute COVID pandemic, as I've started calling it personally, and other kind of issues that tie into this like continuing pandemic that we're all living in and trying to deal with now. So that was part of it. Also wanting to sort of evoke the large global community of people with long COVID, and sort of to say like this isn't just a small group. This is like a time, this like an era of a lot of people being sick at once.
So
So there's kind of that. I don't know, Miles, if you want to say anything else about it.
so the Times is there actually the Times is there being used, it has a dual kind of meaning. It's like the Sick Times in terms of news organization or news outlet, and the Times, the era that we live in.
The
Okay.
times that we live in. Yeah.
Time we live in.
Yeah.
Okay, I get that. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Also, Miles should talk about the mascot because that was his idea.
oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, the sick time. So we had that because we also wanted people to like, if they were, like long COVID isn't always identifiable as, something that people may think they have. So a lot of people get sick after COVID and then have all these health issues and don't link it specifically to a long COVID diagnosis.
Mhm.
So we wanted something that would draw people in. And then we came up with this, our mascot is the Caladrius, which is a mythical bird that's been in a lot of different, sort of evolved through different cultures and time. But it's sort of a healing bird that has a lot of different appearances. Sometimes it's white, but it's been in like medieval bestials. It's been in like Greek mythology, as well as Indian mythology. It sort of started as this bird that would absorb illness. So I think the main one was cholera that it was first sort of started with. So it would go to a patient, land on them, absorb their illness, and then fly out and get rid of it, and then be a healthy bird and continue to do that for many people. So we wanted something sort of uplifting that promoted, healing, and it's kind of our guiding force as we report and go forward.
I want to bring up one thing that Betsy had mentioned about looking at recovering the NIH, and so some of that was actually, I think, there was just a recent Time magazine opinion piece, basically that used sort of your reporting to say, oh, then we shouldn't be doing this anymore. We shouldn't have any more biomedical research because the NIH program was so screwed up, essentially. So they seem to sort of piggyback on some of your reporting to make their argument. And I just was wondering what you thought of their argumentation.
Oh, I'm not a fan of their argument. Yeah. I mean, I just think that I can understand why that is one conclusion somebody could come to from that reporting. But I really think from all of the researchers and patient advocates who I've talked to about Recover, really what they say is like, number one, Recover hasn't completed yet. Like, sure, obviously there are all of these problems that have been identified. It's been set up poorly in many ways, and there are many sort of issues that you can point to. However, I think people still have optimism that there could be useful results out of this. Like the clinical trials have just started. Obviously, there are a lot of concerns about them, but still, I think people are kind of looking for any useful information that may
So
result.
you're
And
just
also,
second. What was that? Your last thing you said? You think people are used to?
The clinical trials that have started in the last couple of months, I think obviously there are concerns about them as I have written, but I think there's still some hope that useful information could come out of it, at the very least, maybe ruling out certain treatments. And then I think there are a lot of lessons that have been learned from Recover that could be then used to better support future research,
Right.
in terms of like how grants should be decided, or how to set up studies, how to better incorporate patient engagement, and all of these things that maybe have not gone well with Recover so far, could be used for kind of future research. And so I think just based on the interviews that I've done on this, I would say that like more funding is needed, but maybe a reconsideration on how to set up those studies.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks to both of you. I will, let's see, find where the